It's Binjay 91.5. And from Studio 2 this morning, we have Matthew Dickerson's Tech Talk. I'm your host, Tony Grant. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Tony. Great to be chatting technology on binging again.
Yes, I'm glad to field your enthusiasm. And let me tell you, I'm enthusiastic too.
Oh, good.
Now, did you see the wild fireworks after Joe Biden's victory speech? And the question is, how were they created, Matthew?
It's an interesting one, Tony, because fireworks these days are not the flavour of the month. The environmental impact of all that smoke and burning all that, effectively gunpowder and metals, is something that people are really saying, do we really need fireworks anymore? There's a fire hazard with it. There seems to be the cost, the impact on the environment. And so some very clever people have come up with something that's a little bit different. And it was used by Joe Biden after his victory speech. And the whole display was pretty impressive. It spelled out the name Biden. It had the USA. It had a map of the whole United States. And I was actually pretty impressed with it. I thought, that's pretty cool. Let me go and have a look at how they did that. And so obviously it was done with lights in the sky. But rather than being shone from the ground up, they actually had a swarm of drones, and they had effectively LED lights on the bottom of them. And if you remember back to the old days, Tony, when you and I were kids, we'd get a sparkler and we'd try and spell out our name with a sparkler in the air. It's the same sort of concept where a light in the air will kind of hang in the air or hang in our retina for a certain period of time, and so it kind of has that image there. And that's exactly what they do with these drones. They put up a number of drones, they fly around in a I suppose, an orchestrated dance. And if you can imagine all those drones flying around, it just sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. But you don't have humans piloting them because it would be just too difficult to control those drones with a human pilot. You actually have it all pre-programmed via computer, and they've all got their set flight paths, their set sequences, and away they go. So they've got GPS systems inside them. They're all very accurate in terms of where they go, and they go and give you this unbelievable fireworks display. So I was pretty impressed with it. I'm not sure exactly how many drones were used after the Joe Biden victory speech. Certainly a number of ones were used, but there's a world record that was recently beaten for this type of display. And the initial, or the previous world record was held by Intel, the semiconductor company, and that had a display that had 2,066 simultaneous drones performing. But just in September this year, a Chinese company broke that with 3,051 drones. One thing I don't know, Tony, is how loud it is with 3,051 drones, because I know the noise that one drone makes. Having 3,000 up in the air, I can imagine would be just a little bit noisier.
Yeah, look, when I saw it, I thought to myself that they don't actually look like fireworks because they're too sharp. I thought it might have been some sort of LED technology, but also using skyrockets in the background. I think they might have done that.
I think they actually did a bit of a combination. I think they actually had a few traditional fireworks in combination with the drones. And look, again, that's something where you're reducing the amount of fireworks actually being used in a display. And I can just see this sort of technology growing and growing. We know those wonderful New Year's Eve fireworks that we see in Sydney Harbour each year, when you've got these beautiful waterfalls falling over the edge of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I'm just imagining how they might start to choreograph all of that with drones. I think it'll be quite impressive. I'm sure people are working on it as we speak.
They'll still need drones to go bang, Matthew.
They might have some speakers on them, Tony, to actually put out some little sonic booms.
Yes. Now, we know scammers aren't terribly smart. But how about ringing the South Australian Cybercrime Unit to try and scare them? Seems like a step too far, even for a scammer, doesn't it?
It does sound just a little bit silly, doesn't it? And obviously, it tells you what they're doing. They're not obviously having any idea of the numbers that they're calling. They just have a sequence of numbers, and they just go through and ring those numbers. But the police that they rang, or the cybercrime unit that they rang, did something that I actually do this sometimes when I get rung by them. I'm interested to see what they're trying to do, so I actually go along and string them along for a little while until they finally get sick of me. And I've had a few call me some choice words at the end of when they finally realise that I'm not going to fall for their scam. They've actually given me this tirade of abusive language. Is how dare I waste their time? Ignore the fact that they're wasting thousands of people's times around the world. But so they rang the cybercrime unit in South Australia, and the cybercrime unit actually went along and listened to what they were trying to do. And so they said that they actually pointed them to a website that looked like the NBN website and said that there was a problem with their NBN, of course, and this is how they would fix it. And then what they were getting them to do, or trying to get them to do, was to click on one of the links which would download a bit of software which would allow them to take control. Now, what the police did was they said, I'm trying to click on it and I can't do it. What should I do now? And of course, they directed them to further sites or further spots on that site to try and get them to download other software. And obviously, all of that software was going to allow them to either have their computer invaded or have a virus infect their computer, or allow that person at the other end of the phone to take control of it. And after they went on for a little while, the scammer finally realised that they weren't getting very far. They either thought that this is someone that's onto me, or someone's really stupid and they can't actually click on the right link, damn it. But there were a few things that tipped them off. One of the things that was, I'm surprised of this one, but one of the things was that they hadn't even gone to the trouble of trying to create a domain name that looked a bit like the NBN. The police said that the actual name of the domain name that was used was Weebly.com. Now, Weebly is a web hosting site, just the same as you see Wix or one of those other various hosting sites. Weebly is one of those. So that's a bit of a giveaway that I don't think the NBN would just use a public web hosting site. And then, obviously, the instructions they were trying to give were pretty obvious. And the site wasn't quite right. There are a few things on the site that didn't quite look like the real NBN site. But it's a good warning to everyone that they're out there, they're trying over and over and over. And if someone rings and says, we found a problem and we need you to go to this site, then that's a pretty clear indication that there's something that's not quite right.
Yes, Matthew. I just love those ones that ring me up and on my VoIP phone on the NBN and tell me there's a problem with the NBN that they need to fix. And look, I just burst out in uncontrollable laughing. I don't say anything else. I just burst out laughing at them. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of listening to the click.
And of course, the irony is, if your NBN's not working, then how are you ringing me on it? How are you expecting me to go to my computer and access a site if my NBN's not working? Yeah,
exactly.
There's not a lot of logic. But unfortunately, Tony, people still fall for it. I mean, the figures from last financial year in Australia, it was 7.6 billion was the cost to Australia from cybercrime last year. So people fall for a whole range of things, and I'm not having a go at the people that fall for them, because sometimes they're very convincing in the way they do it.
Yes, well, I must confess I'm the most abusive person on a telephone when it gets to be a scammer at the other end. Yeah. And, I try lots of different things to see how it works. You know? It's added colour to my life.
Yes, yeah. Well, they're frustrating and annoying. So if you can get some enjoyment out of it, then that's good.
You get an opportunity to do things to these sort of people that you wouldn't do with anybody else.
That's right.
Now, excuse me. What's the latest technology announcement by the New South Wales government to try and keep COVID-19 in check?
Yeah, from 23rd of November, Tony, it'll be compulsory for all hospitality venues in the state to have some form of QR code sign-in system. Now, you can use the Service New South Wales app that the government makes available to people, or you can use one of your own apps that you might have already set up. A lot of organisations have already set up their own app, obviously, but you've got to have some form of QR code scanning. So when you walk into places now, most places I go to have got something there. The real question, and I don't know the answer to this, Tony, is can you still use the good old-fashioned paper and pen as well as the QR code? So if I'm a patron that turns up to my local pub or cafe or restaurant and I either don't have a smartphone or I've left it at home, or I choose not to basically have a device that allows me to scan QR codes, am I allowed to go into that particular establishment? Surely they're not going to make it so that it's compulsory for patrons to use it. Compulsory for the establishment to have it available, I understand that. But hopefully it's not compulsory for patrons, because I think that will exclude a certain part of our entire society, because there are some people out there who don't have smartphones or choose not to have a phone at all.
Yeah, well, I do notice that there are venues operating side-by-side systems, so I think that's the way they'll go.
That makes sense, and I think that's the way they'll go as well, but I haven't been able to find that information yet to see whether compulsory QR code means that as well as, or only QR code scanning.
Well, we'll have to find out.
Hmm.
And you've been listening to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson on Binjang 91.5. Stay tuned this afternoon for the next episode. And in the meantime, enjoy all the great music and community information on your local station.